Come light it up, I'm ready to go. Come light it up, come light it up, I'm ready to go. Come light it up,
All right. Hello, everyone. I'm excited to welcome you to the final session of Datanova as we dive into one of the biggest challenges that data users are facing today, and that is data democratization and data accessibility. This year alone, we have seen the increasing shift towards data democratization through the increased culture of collaboration in the data space. Many are leaning towards building out open data architectures that have multiple table formats, multiple engines, and multiple modular open source tools that all build up to one data ecosystem. But as we open up data, we also encounter challenges. So how do we ensure privacy and security? How can we standardize access across organizations and platforms? And perhaps most importantly, how can we create data products that are truly valuable, accessible, and trusted? So today, we are fortunate to have an incredible panel of experts with us to unpack these questions and explore the evolving landscape of data. They bring diverse perspectives from technology, policy, and industry, offering insights on how to navigate this complex, ever-changing field. So without further ado, let's dive in. Please join me in welcoming our distinguished panelists. So first up, we have Rob Seidman, the Director of Cloud Innovation at SS&C Technologies. Then Wayne Eckerson, the President of Eckerson Group, and our very own Adrian Estala, the Field Chief Data Officer at Starburst.
Hello.
Getting started. Let's start by talking about the desire to access data. So yesterday at Datanova, there was lots of talk about the increased desire for data democratization for the purpose of AI. But there are plenty of other lines of business and business units now starting to recognize the power of immediate data access. So I will start with Adrian. If you could set the scene on the state of our technology landscape today. So what are some of the challenges that any data architecture is forced to tackle with regards to data sharing, data access, and data democratization?
Great question. Happy to get started with this distinguished group. So I think let's kind of break it up in three layers, right? And so on the far left, I've got my infrastructure, my architecture. In the middle, I've got kind of a serving layer, how I actually present that data to my consumer. On the far right, I've got my consumer. I think on the far left, we start with that data architecture. I mean, we all accept, I don't know anyone that hasn't yet accepted this notion of a hybrid ecosystem, right? We understand that we're dealing with cloud and on-prem. We're understanding we're dealing with multi-cloud. I spent the last couple of weeks in Asia, and very much a reality across the world, a hybrid environment. I think we've learned to accept that. I think at the same time, more and more, we're starting to embrace this notion of an open architecture. Open meaning we need to make sure that all of our tools can access the data, right? This idea that we once had of putting everything into one pocket and then trying to force everyone to that pocket, I think that's slowly starting to leave the common focus, right? And our new focus is access the data where it is and do that with an open architecture. So on the architecture side, I feel like we've made great strides. In that middle layer, the serve layer, I think that's where we're just really starting to scratch the surface, really starting to understand how to build an abstraction layer, right? I want to hide that complexity from my business teams. I want to create an environment where they don't care where the data is. They just know where to find it. There's a marketplace or a data mart where they can go and they can get the data that they need. And so that serving layer, if you will, in the middle is super important for us, that abstraction. On the far right, I think it's the most important, right? And so we think about data architecture challenges for data sharing. I think the biggest challenges and probably the most important opportunities for us really are on the business side, right? I think what we're really focused on here is not building a data architecture, but building a business architecture. That's the new focus, is really trying to figure out how we can make data work for our business teams, driving self-service capabilities. And the challenge for us is the diversity of the use cases. I've got so many AI use cases. I've got so many BI use cases. I've got so many traditional application use cases that how do I create an abstraction layer that'll allow me to empower and deliver against that diverse use case? And so I'm really thinking empowering the business through a business architecture is the way to go. There's a very long answer to start the session. Sorry, I should have given it a little shorter response.
All good. I think you will like some of the upcoming questions too. But I am going to pass it over to Wayne. I'm curious what you're hearing from organizations surrounding this challenge of data democratization. Are we at a place where people are more inclined to want to move fast and grant additional access? Or are organizations afraid of the risk that comes alongside over-indexing on data accessibility?
Yeah, most of the clients that we work with are trying to figure out that right balance.
If they've got a security or privacy team and they're in ascendance, there's a little bit more of a tendency to lock things down. And then, of course, the users get frustrated that they can't access the data and they can't use it, to make decisions and run the business. So we oftentimes come in and become like the person who settles the truce, right, between these two groups and establishes some kind of balance between protection and enablement. So that's a key thing that a lot of organizations struggle with. But even before that, I've come up with this mantra because we go in and we typically interview a lot of users to create a data strategy, business users, technical users, and we come across the same thing time and again. So we created this mantra of users. They complain in every organization that they can't find the data. If they find it, they can't access it and they have to wait weeks. Once they access it, they don't trust it, right? So this is kind of like the proverbial, Gordian's knot. And it takes a lot of effort from organizations to figure out how to slice that and break through. Because ultimately, the big challenge that every organization I've worked with is facing is a bottleneck. Users are bottlenecked from getting at the data. And bottleneck could be a number of different things, but a data strategy ultimately has to address that issue. How do we give users quick access to data based on their authorization levels so that they can do something with it in a timely manner? And that is just not an easy thing to do.
Yeah, not a simple task, that's for sure. All right, I will pass it over to Rob. What criteria do you think is important to consider as internal and external stakeholders, both technical and non-technical, start looking for additional data access?
So we sort of see the same thing that Wayne just mentioned, with a lot of times business users are coming and they're looking for data. And so, we're in the process of building out this kind of democratized data universe. So a lot of the times we're vetting both the providers of the data because, we can't do everything. We need to be able to kind of federate access to the people who are the SMEs and know that data the best. So it's almost like, qualifying, an opportunity internally or sometimes externally that you have to go through. It's a journey. And so, part of it is finding out how much, of the exploration that we're going to do, like how much is already known and how, sophisticated are the people that are coming to ask. So, typically it's, where's the data live, as Wayne says, one of the first questions, because if they're asking you, it means they're not the stewards of that data. Next question is, do you have the rights to that data, or do we have to broker them for you as part of this kind of onboarding process? And really, it's like, what are you ultimately trying to do with the data? Like, is it actually raw data? I can't tell you how many times I've shown people, here's the data, and they're like, what am I looking at? And they're expecting to see bar charts and pie charts. Oh, that's the data. And so you do kind of have to quantify the level of maturity and understanding, because on the other side, it is all about security. You're going to give them access to this data that didn't have before. So just simple things like, do you understand the power of the API keys to access this data that we're about to give you? Or do you have an understanding of the ramifications of global data protection laws and regulations? And if the answer is no, then you know that you have to kind of put some additional controls and training in place before you just let people run rampant with what could potentially be very sensitive data.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. All right, so next question, or next section that we have. So we heard in today's keynote that we have to redefine data access when considering that lots of organizations are now in a position where they have expanded their ecosystem to include both on-prem and cloud architectures. More organizations are faced with the challenges that are associated with hybrid architecture, and the complexity is continuing to skyrocket. So I'm actually going to send it back to Rob now. What are some of the new challenges that organizations face when trying to increase data accessibility in this hybrid architecture? And how should organizations balance the impact of legacy technology with the desire for innovation in the cloud and the need to access both environments?
Sure. So as mentioned, the teams I work with are often just interested in, we need the data. And so where it lives or, what technology it's stored in is very much an afterthought to be figured out later. We do see kind of the bigger the organization, whether that's internally or externally, the kind of bigger the data sprawl. You'll see, maybe a mid-sized organization kind of has one cloud, but then you get to the really big organizations and every, desk or every kind of business unit has their own kind of footprint on public clouds, hybrid of on-premise, legacy solutions. And so this is where the data mesh technology really shines because, from a technology perspective, the could we, it's usually almost always a resounding yes. Like, we absolutely can plug in, but it's not could we, it's should we. And then you have to have kind of detailed conversations with, let's say, external IT departments that may not want you connecting directly to their data sitting on the third floor of, the skyscraper in Manhattan. That's, their very protected data source. But one of the things we see is that there's a lot more openness, especially if it's on public cloud, as long as, you can match the level of kind of security and robust policies that are in place for that data. If it's at as good or better, then usually people are a little bit more open to letting you connect to stuff that's on the public cloud, especially if it's just a SaaS solution or an offering that is run by a third party. That's usually where we see the least resistance.
Good answer. I love that we're already tapping into some of the future questions that we'll be talking about today. So back to Adrian. The panel that you moderated yesterday, I believe, discussed federated data access being a beneficial strategy towards a successful AI implementation. Can you elaborate on other ways that federated data access can be beneficial to the business? And you are muted.
There you go. I was gonna say this group is starting on fire, and then I was on mute when I said it. So great answer so far. Really good answer so far. So what a way to close day 2 of Datanova. So we had a great session yesterday. Hopefully everyone was able to attend it. If not, there's a recording for you on federated access and how it accelerates some AI projects and use cases. I think from a business perspective, the reason federation is important for me really is twofold. One is it's that big title, right? Time to insight, right? I need access to data now, just like Wayne said. The other challenge and the other opportunity there for business teams is to really get them involved, right? And so getting to new data for new questions is really the competitive advantage we're looking for, right? If I was just trying to solve answers to old questions with old data, a lot of the solutions I have today can work. Maybe I don't need federation. New data, new questions is really where federation shines if I'm on the business side. One of the reasons why that shines is because it drives and accelerates discovery. I need to figure out, as Wayne said earlier, where's my data? Well, let's sit down, let's discover via a federated model where that data might be. What if I take this table, this column, this table, and I put it together? Does that work? That doesn't work. What if I do it this way? That doesn't work. And so the ability from a business perspective to ideate very quickly in a room to accelerate my data project from 2 months to 2 weeks because I got the data that I needed on day 1, that's the real value of the business. If I can get my data projects done faster, if I can get them done at a lower cost, that means I can hit the market quicker, but that means I can also save that money for other investments, other innovations. So huge benefit for the business, I think, with federation.
Yep, totally agree. All right, Wayne, do you have any suggestions or strategies? These can be either technical or strategic towards enabling distributed data access across multiple systems on a consistent basis.
Yeah, I want to reinforce what Adrian said about federation. It's really important that you have that kind of arrow in your quiver when you need it. A lot of the organizations that we work with, they've got a data ecosystem, data environment that's maybe a decade or more old, and it's kind of gotten moribund. It's monolithic, it's costly to change, and a lot of users don't even access it. In many cases, sometimes they even restricted access to it. So in those cases, there's just a huge pent-up need for information from a specific group of users. I call them power users, right? So we usually recommend to inject agility into this monolithic environment that they implement a data fabric, query federation, data virtualization, whatever you want to call this technology that liberates the power users to go out and do what they are supposed to be doing, which is go get data from wherever it lies to answer new questions that weren't asked, yesterday, last week, last month, last year. They really are the change agents. And if you don't liberate them with an environment that, this data fabric environment that allows them to connect to anything, anywhere, anytime, pull it together, do those experiments, do the exploration needed to answer these questions, your data environment is providing no value whatsoever. So that's an environment we usually recommend in that situation that they get a query federation tool, data fabric, whatever, to inject agility back into an old stale environment.
That's a great suggestion. All right, jumping into one of my favorite topics, which is security and governance. So it is fair to say that in some instances, there can be an inverse relationship between security and governance alongside data sharing and accessibility. Organizations in today's age are challenged with simultaneously encouraging data transparency, but also protecting that data privacy. So Wayne, when striking the right balance between data accessibility and data security, what kind of criteria should be evaluated when trying to determine how risky to be? And how does this change when sharing data with internal and external stakeholders?
Yeah, I'm not our security and privacy expert, and we always have these discussions with clients. You know, do you use the principle of least privilege, where you're only given access for the task, and you spend a lot of time, if you're a power user, requesting permission, filling forms out in triplicate, and waiting days or weeks for access to data? Or do you provide birthright access, right? Which means that based on your role, you should be given access to these environments or these data sets, you know, when you come into the organization or when you change roles, right? And then anything in addition to that, then you would have to go through the permission process to do that. So, you know, there is that give and take, and every organization is going to have to make a different decision on where it comes down. But ideally, you bake in access upfront into the tools, into the environment itself, so that users have the least resistance possible to getting the data they need when they need it, especially those power users, right? Because they're the ones who are always pushing the envelope, pushing the limits of your access controls. So you don't really want to slow them down too much, or else you're doing damage to the organization. But there are going to be instances where you have to slow them down a little bit when they're really looking at new things. The other thing that needs to be considered is that every organization needs to identify its sensitive data, whether it's PII or competitive information. And again, based on roles and access controls, obfuscate that data where necessary, right? Probably most of the time for most users, obfuscate that using a number of techniques and do it dynamically so that it can be changed based on who's accessing the data at what time, for what purpose.
Yep. Great answers. All right, Adrian. So how do international regulations and policies affect data sharing across borders? And what are some strategies organizations are using to navigate these complexities?
Yeah, I love the data sovereignty challenges. I think are personally one of the challenges I love to kind of address. I think one of it's obviously very relevant, but two, I think it's something that we can solve, and we're starting to solve now with data products. So oftentimes, whether I'm dealing in the EU or in Asia, and we're trying to work with data sovereignty challenges, the issue is I have to do data processing in country, and then I have to limit the data that leaves the country, right? And so these are getting more and more, they're getting stricter, right? And so I was going to say they're getting clear. I'm not sure everybody would agree. In some cases, they're getting less clear, but they're certainly there's more robustness, so to speak, in the governance requirements and policies. And so how do you do that, right? And so the way that we do that, the way that we've been trying to solve that problem is really by building data products in country. And so I want to do the processing in country with the data in country. I don't care what the sources look like in country because I'm going to federate locally, but I can build data products. And then every data product that I build, I can ensure that it's following local policies, whether that's a 1,000 transaction rule. There's different rules for banks, different rules for different types of transactions. But if I can make sure that the data that I'm putting into the data product is compliant with that regulatory requirement, and then I can, every time that data product leaves the country, I can track it. So if an auditor comes in, I can say, this is the data that left. I know it's complying with the rule, and this is exactly where it went. That gives me everything I need to follow the regulatory requirements for GDPR or any of the upcoming kind of data sovereignty rules. And so I think that's a game changer in the way that we do data access across countries. I also want to add something else to the question that Wayne answered a second ago. I think part of the challenge here when we want to open up access to teams is the business teams. I used to have an EVP of finance that would tell me, Adrian, why does it take 3 of your CDO office team members for me to get access to my data? Every time I need access to my data, I got to go through 3 IT guys. And the challenge is they rarely knew exactly where their data was. They could rarely tell me exactly what they wanted. And so that's a trick, right? They don't know where it is, and they don't really know what they're asking for. And so, of course, it takes a team of IT people just to figure that out. When we build data products and we allow the teams to see the description, right? I've already aggregated the data for you. I've given you a description so you can kind of, it's like walking into a pharmacy and picking up boxes off a shelf. Do I need this? Nope, I don't need that. I know what's inside the box. I know how to use it, and I know who owns it, who to call if I have a question. That's a data experience we're looking for. And I think if we can create data products in that fashion, I know their risk profile because I know exactly what's inside the box. All of a sudden, I'm enabling my teams to very easily find the data they want. It doesn't mean that everybody can open the box, right? I have access rules. When I open the box, maybe I can see all the data. Maybe when Wayne opens the same box, he can only see some columns. Maybe Rob opens the same box, he can't see anything. But that's the experience that I want for my teams. If I want to enable more access, I need to at least allow them to see what's available in smaller chunks and data product chunks, and then request access for what they need. That accelerates the process so much better.
Definitely agreed. All right, Rob, what are some best practices for establishing and maintaining data sharing protocols that ensure both efficient access and robust security measures?
Yeah, I like what Wayne said earlier, that I'm definitely not the CISO, but you kind of find yourself in that position when you're opening up access to data for the first time, to Adrian's point, to people in other countries that may not have ever had that access before. So, really, I think the word and the keyword here is federation. It helps you think about it, where we can't decide those policies. There was a couple, birthright and least privileges, like that's for each team to decide, because each of these data use cases can be wildly different, have wildly different constraints. Some of it's PII, some of it's very sensitive financial data, some of it just belongs to third-party vendors. And so you have to kind of sort that out and let the experts who are the closest to that data leverage, whatever their policies and procedures need to be, and support them. So when we talk about federation, my team likes to say it's like we're kind of like a federal government, but it's not. Everyone else are the states. We need to kind of empower their autonomy and provide them with tools such that they can apply these kind of good policies and procedures. So often you'll find that, because this need hasn't existed before, sometimes there's just, binary access. You either have access to the global database or not, and that's not going to fly like that. So then you need to decide, well, we can do a little bit better. Maybe we can give people, first of all, read-only access to mitigate some of the damage of the upstream, or you can, provide kind of segmented access, but then there's additional controls provided by the platform that we're using to be able to go a little bit further and provide row level column detail. So the idea is give the people the tools in which they can manage their own kind of data governance outwardly, as opposed to trying to centralize it and solve it for effectively the whole world, which is a little bit of a problem.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. All right, so another exciting topic is data products. As trusted, curated data sets delivered for a specific purpose to a specific group of people, data products can assist in the democratization journey. I know Adrian's very excited to talk about this, so I will go to you first. What role do data products and data strategy play in facilitating effective data sharing, and what best practices should organizations follow?
I like your definition, Brandy. I'll tell you, I had a number of executive dinners last few weeks, and one of the questions that I asked this group of CTOs and CDOs, we started off with trying to define data products. Very difficult to define. Everyone has a different definition. About the only thing that I think we can center on is this idea that we're building something for the business, right? It's consumer focused. It's a product because it's valuable to somebody, right? It isn't somebody in IT in a room locked and we're just going to create something and hope somebody uses it. No, there's a design to it. There's a purpose to it. The other element that I think most would agree to is that it's reusable. What's unique about the approach that we take to data products, it's not just the federation, it's also you have to understand the way that we build it via query. And so our data products allow that agility. They allow you to run faster. And I think really we think about the benefits, we think about a broader data strategy. Speed for my business underscores my business strategy and my IT strategy. And so if I can deliver faster for my business at lower cost, then I'm winning, right? And data products certainly enable that because we're reusing data, because we trust the data, because we drive greater consistency because of that reuse. And so I think there's a huge benefit there. We're also empowering the business, right? And so this isn't something we achieve overnight. As you grow out a data product strategy, I like to start with a Pathfinder, start small with the team and then grow outward to other teams. You want to make sure that teams are kind of willing to roll their sleeves up. They want to, or they need to want to work with data products. But as you start to kind of create excitement, as teams start to realize, hey, I can build my own data products. Hey, I can share my data products. I can deliver my projects faster. I think that balance, right? The shift of balance, not just in ownership, because now your business teams own the data equally to your IT teams, but also just in development, right? Your IT teams used to be the bottleneck because you're waiting on a backlog for IT to move data or model data. But in a world where teams can start to build their own data products, use them for themselves and share them, you're really giving the keys to the business to drive as fast as they want. It doesn't mean that you're allowing them to do whatever they want. You build some guardrails. You limit the access on the back end in terms of sources that they can kind of connect to. But if you can allow them to build their own data products and then share those data products, I mean, that's really the key to driving a true competitive advantage.
Yep. All right, Rob, one major component of data products is the foundational data aspect, which provides trusted, reliable data to downstream consumers. What are some of the strategies to obtain a state of data that is trusted and reliable, regardless of where that data lives?
So similarly to what I was talking about before with Federation, we built this platform to allow our users to, as Adrian said, kind of drive the process of building their own data products and accelerating their business needs. So the way that our platform works is, or what we found over time, is that it's usually a subset of users, like the data scientists, the engineers, the pre-sales folks that have very good knowledge of the data, and they'll want to go in and write those queries and kind of construct that formal data product, but that the rest of the business, vast majority, are consumers of that, and they need the ability to kind of go in and discover it. And so this is not something that you can centralize, just like the security protocols. You have to kind of decentralize and federate access to the defining of those things. I'll just give you a few examples of how, cross-domain they can get. In financial services, there's especially in accounting, there's all sorts of processes around finalizing NAV numbers, NAV being net asset value. And it's not something you could get wrong, like when there's, billions of dollars on the line and every basis point counts. So the way that at least we do it in a lot of our kind of accounting frameworks that we provide to clients and the data we generate on their behalf, it's very bitemporal. You have 2 dates. You can go back and see the data as it was at a certain date, or you can see it as of now because, in financial services, only recently did we go to a T+1 world from T+2. So there's always these changes rolling in and over time. And if you just naively hit a button and got that data, it might be catastrophic to build business assumptions based on the back of that. Similarly, like maybe a more familiar example, you start plugging into CRM or your kind of customer relation data. Everybody has their own definitions of what a lead stage is, what a customer looks like. And so there's just a need for those teams to kind of explain or kind of bring together in a way that makes sense to the rest of the world when they go to view or use that data product, that it's like fit for purpose in its versions and et cetera. But, it's really up for the SMEs to define and then cascade that to the organization so they feel confident, as was said earlier, that they can use the data and trust it.
Yeah. All right, Wayne, another big component of the data product is working alongside the downstream consumer. What are some of the critical business questions that should be asked and answered before any data is moved, augmented, or shared?
Yeah, I'm a big advocate of data products. I think it takes data from where it's been for a very long time, which is kind of in the regional warehouse. And we force users to go there and figure out, where the product is among this huge maze of aisles and products stacked to the ceiling. And it brings it from that to a retail shopping experience, right? As Adrian was saying. Users should be able to go in there. They should be able to browse different products. They should be able to see ample metadata about those products, just like you go into a store, pick up a product, read the label, understand exactly where it was made, when it was made, what are the ingredients, et cetera, et cetera. So you can make a good decision on whether you want it or not and put it in your basket. So, I think that's really important. But the key to that retail shopping experience is metadata. One of the challenges, I think, with data products, especially done in a distributed environment, are the people building those products, who are building them for their own consumption, actually creating the metadata necessary for others in the organization or even outside the organization to be able to understand and evaluate those data products to see if they are interested in them. The other thing that I think might be particularly pertinent for this conference is that I've been known to say that most data products in the future will be virtual, right? And there's a good reason for that, because if you just have files as products, which you can see in some of these public commerce marketplaces, they're very static. And typically when consumers go and browse data products, either in a marketplace or some kind of a tool, they want a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and they really actually want to combine one or more data products and then filter the result. So you need to, one, have a place for them to experiment, but also to combine data products on the fly. And that really requires a back-end environment that is based on query federation and virtualization. So that's why I think data products are going to be virtual going forward, because it helps the consumer, the retail shopping experience.
100%.
I like that idea. All right, now before we go to the next topic, just back to Adrian for a minute. Is there anything else you want to add to the data products conversation?
There's a lot of, how much time do we have? Now, I want to underscore what Wayne said there a little bit. I think, to me, that the reason why a virtual or a query-based data product makes more sense to me, it's the difference between going to the library versus getting an answer on Google, right? We used to go to, I have a question, let me go write a book, let me publish it, and let me put it on a shelf, right? That's traditional warehousing. Let me find the data, let me model it, let me iterate, let me publish it. I want an answer today. Businesses don't have time for you to write the book, for you to move the data, right? I want an answer today. I want to just write a query. I want to get the answer, and if it's not right, I want to change my query until I get the right answer. That's the model that we should be thinking about. That's why a virtual data product, the way Wayne described it, is really the only way to go.
I have a question for you, Adrian, which is, where should users go to browse and find these data products?
Yeah. Well, first, I would say from an enterprise perspective, the idea that you're going to have data products, you should plan to have data products from many different sources. We would love for them all to be Starburst. There's a purpose that we serve. I love our virtual, our query-based data products, but you'll have other data products. And so I think down the road, I don't know if that's 5 years away, maybe sooner, there should be an enterprise catalog where you can go to. And there's a bunch of great ones out there that are working on this, but there should be an enterprise catalog that you go to find your data products. And you don't care where they came from, right? And they all look the same, and they can be reused and they can be researched, right? And so today in Starburst, for a lot of our customers, we have our own data mart. You go in there, you type a search, you can tag your data products, you can find what you want. And that's fantastic for every data product you build in Starburst. We love that. But ultimately, I think that needs to be extended to all data products across the enterprise.
Yeah, so an enterprise data catalog is where you would find data products. I think that's how a lot of organizations are approaching it. But, you know, a catalog is cataloging everything, right? All your data assets. And to me, a product is like a subset of those data assets and requires a different interface and shopping experience, right? To make it really easy. Yep. And I've been pushing data catalog vendors, the enterprise catalog vendors, to actually embrace the notion of a marketplace, like a retail shopping experience for data that companies can deploy inside of their organizations. And I think some of them are starting to get it. Yep. But in the meantime, there are a lot of other organizations that are stepping up to create these kind of quote unquote marketplaces where you can put these data products and provide access to them in a more retail shopping experience. So we'll see where this ends up. So maybe Rob, who's actually building stuff in the trenches, can comment on where.
Come on, Rob.
We are, in fact, building a marketplace. It's a little bit less focused on the market part of the marketplace at the moment and more about the security and the access that we've been talking about. But no, it's quite literally the place where you would go to find anything from, you know, reporting tools or any other technology you need. Our data is fundamental to that. So if it shows up alongside and is browsable and curatable and permissionable in an application that my team builds and maintains. So yes, we're following suit on that.
Good. It's good to hear.
Good topics. So we have two more to get through as we wrap up this call. So next up, we briefly discussed at the beginning of the panel the increased collaboration as data architectures of today look to be more component-based and modular. So I'll go to Rob first. As the tools get more modular, there comes a risk of implementing proper access control among multiple technologies. How does implementing a sort of semantic-like architecture or federated access control system reduce your overall risk potential?
So it's interesting to ask. I spent the first couple years of my career in financial risk management. So if there's one thing I've learned, there's no such thing as eliminating risk. You can only mitigate it down to a level that you can be comfortable with. And so you're right in that exposing access to data might incur new risks that didn't exist before if there was only two people that ever needed kind of background access to that data. And suddenly it's a data product on the marketplace for 27,000 global employees to view. It's a big deal. But at the same time, you are kind of trading one risk for another, because the risk of an unhappy client, a business unit that misses a deadline from, as what was said before, publishing the book and waiting till it gets on the shelf is not something that people are willing to put up with. So usually it's about identifying, I like, when said metadata, that's key, of identifying, well, what's in this data? Are there any of the major pain points that are going to prevent or going to really create undue risks and burden on whoever is exposing this data? It might be as simple as PII and geographically aware data. It might be crown jewel data. It might be data that we're just contracted with that, hey, that costs money. You can't just open it up and give it to everybody. And so really it's just about, giving people access and giving people the controls that, maybe that's a 4 eyes principle sort of thing, that before you can just click a button and get access, someone in that group needs to approve you. So there's an audit trail. Or, maybe it's the ability to, periodically review in quite frequently the access. So that way people who no longer need access can be removed. So that way people aren't left with API keys that, for better or for worse, can be used as a risk to access the data unnecessarily. So again, you can't really get rid of all the risks, but by putting controls and processes that are very visible in place, it provides a lot of comfort and does mitigate the risk down to a level that at least we can move more quickly than we could before the data had been exposed.
Definitely agreed. All right, now Wayne. So obviously every organization is going to have a different architectural approach and a different journey to reach full democratization. How can smaller organizations or startups participate in data sharing initiatives without the same resources as larger entities? And what support mechanisms are available for them?
Wow. Okay, that's a good question. I think maybe first principles, what is the purpose of architecture? In the technology space, we tend to get, very focused on the technology, and we forget that the purpose of using the technology and designing architectures is to meet users where they're at. And I find that most organizations don't really know who their users are. So how can you design an architecture or access controls or data literacy programs or support until you really know who your users are and classify them into buckets? And then, and to me, this is the whole key to self-service or data democratization, whatever you want to call it. Know thy user. That's the very first step, and one that everyone forgets or is too busy to really go out and take a true inventory of their users. So again, these modern data ecosystems, we're all about data lakes and lake houses and hybrid architectures, and we forget that the majority of your users really just want the answers stitched together in a report, right? That they can drill down on, and seems simple, but it's really hard to do. So there is value in the old data warehousing world from the notion of let's take data from multiple functions and stitch it together in some kind of semantic model or data model so that users can access that. Actually, most users don't want to access the semantic layer. They just want the report that comes off the semantic layer, right? So, what are the first principles here? And let's create and design architectures that give users the data they need, how they need it, when they need it, so they can do their jobs, not learn how to be data experts. Now, every organization needs a few data experts, and those are the power users who would really benefit from a data fabric, query federation tools. But that's just one of a number of different classes of users that an architecture really needs to support and address.
Yeah, great points. Know thy users is a great motto. I like that. And wrapping it up with Adrian. So how does modularity influence data products? Are data products more beneficial as our architectures use more technologies, or does it become overly complex?
Yeah, I think data products create that abstraction layer. I think for a lot of us, when we think about trying to create modular data architectures or dreaming about creating a data architecture solution that is almost interchangeable, that I can just move the parts out, I don't know that we have the time, right? What I mean by that is I think a lot of us are caught in the middle of cloud migration, right? Maybe we started cloud migration late and we didn't finish. And so I've got on-prem and the cloud, right? Maybe some companies out there haven't even started cloud migration. And then there's a few, I know company I came from, we started cloud migration in 2016 and finished years ago, right? And so for those that have already gone into the cloud, maybe that's an advantage they have. But even for those organizations, they still find themselves with multiple clouds or some new on-prem solutions. So what I'm saying is the complexity that's there on the architecture side is a reality, and the business teams don't have the patience to wait. You can't go to the business team and say, hey, just give me another 2 years. I'm going to create this great modular architecture. Yeah, it's not the way it works, right? We have to find ways to exploit the data where it sits. And so I think data products, if I think about these query-based, these federated data products, they give me the modularity that the business teams need, right? They're business-facing agility, business-facing data products. And so regardless of what I look like on the back end, I don't care where my data is, that abstraction layer with data products allows me to give the business teams that feel like it's easy to get the data, that feel like I can interchange the parts. And if I decide to move the data on the back end, if your data product is query-based, all you do is update the query. And so all of a sudden, it doesn't matter where your data sits. The only thing that matters is making that metadata, making that data product easily accessible to the business team. So I certainly think data products help to simplify that back-end complexity.
Yeah, totally agree. All right, final topic, and it's an exciting one. So as AI becomes increasingly utilized among data platforms, there will be an increased demand for more complete data sets. I'll go back to Rob again. So how do you ensure the data you're sharing or receiving from partners is trustworthy and high quality for all purposes, including future AI use cases?
So I guess I could talk about just in general, and then I can talk about AI specifically. So we can't force our users or our clients to, follow any certain protocols or procedures, but we can advise, as to some of the best practices. So one of those, which doesn't come into play so much with the query federation directly, but maybe upstream, is take more of an ELT approach rather than an ETL approach, which means extract and then load your data. Don't transform it before going in, because then you kind of lose the raw data. And I like to tell my team that I'm allergic to deleting data. Like in today, like we can just pile stuff up. Like there's no reason that we need to be purging things until it really becomes a colossal data problem. And this is for a reason. It's because you may have a need to go back and replicate the data as it was at that date. I mentioned bitemporal earlier. There's been situations, not necessarily like in past lives, where I've had to deal with regulators and saying, how did more comfort in it when you can go back and you've got every step of the way and you can replicate that. And so really, like, you can, using things like as at or as of and kind of bitemporal time helps give some confidence that you can have some controls. You can kind of look perpendicularly through the data and see how a certain data element has changed over time if you have that capability. And when it comes to AI, you can think of AI like the power user that was just mentioned before. Like AI is really just going to be a user that's extremely hungry for your data. And so you need to put good data into it to get data out. But anecdotally, like, some people are willing to just tell their whole life story and life secret and just pitch, all of the sensitive data over to, a third party AI vendor just to get an answer. And so that's where controls really matter. It's not just the integrity of the data, it's the integrity of what where the data is going, how it's used, and ultimately the data that gets fed back into the mesh is also important that there's integrity behind that. So ways that we've handled that is, if stuff's outside or it's a third party, then we won't let the data get sent. You can send metadata. We use things like AI querying agents to help you write the SQL, but it won't ever have access to the row level details to see your sensitive data. Alternatively, you can run internal LLMs, which we're starting to do in mass, and then you can kind of, use it because it is a bit more ephemeral. And usually what people are doing is they want to have alerts from that. And as I mentioned, kind of just use that as kind of a derived data engine. So it is very important that you can trace it all the way from inception, if it, is internal or outside the firewall, to that final output from, an LLM, that every step of the way is auditable, either, directly or implicitly, so you can replicate exactly what was done. That tends to build confidence.
Yep, those are very helpful frameworks. All right, then Wayne. So collaboration is key in any future data developments, especially with the need for cross-organizational data sharing. What frameworks do you see becoming standards in order for teams to share data with one another?
Well, that's a good question. I'm actually still pondering some things that I was thinking about when Rob, so I want to address that to start. And I'm wondering if there's going to be a growing tension between data products on one hand, which pre-packages up data assets in a governed way and makes them really accessible, and AI, because AI, it's so powerful, it'll enable users to write natural language queries, take the results, join them, stitch them, prepare them, visualize them, all with a click of a button, right? So in other words, it will give the ability to all users to become like power users, right? We can now ask ad hoc questions facilitated by AI. But do you want users to do that? Because typically in the past, when we've given users this ad hoc capability, they create all these spread marks, right? And data gets completely chaotic and out of control and inconsistent. Wouldn't we rather move them into the world of data products, right? Where presumably the data products are certified. That's why they're data products, not data assets, right? They've been governed and they've been targeted, and someone's always looking to improve them, right? So I guess that's a question that I have. I don't know if Rob or Adrian want to address that. In terms of collaboration, once data becomes more trustworthy in an organization, users are less apt to hold on to it really tightly and protect their little piece of the data turf, and they're more willing to share it, right? And give that burden of managing the data to a trusted central service provider rather than take that burden on themselves, which we see all the time. People are managing these spreadsheets, and then all of a sudden everyone wants access to that spreadsheet. It's got valuable information, and then they spend all this time that they should be doing on their real job, being a data manager. So, I guess the first moving principle is, how do you gain trust in data in an organization? And it goes back to, I think, the world of data products.
Yeah, that's a great point. All right, so Adrian, you've got about a minute for this one. How can organizations measure the success and impact of their data sharing initiatives?
Let's throw that question away. Let's go back to Wayne's question. No, we only have more time. So real quick, I think for the companies we work with that are driving AI, I think the challenge you're finding is the AI is ready, more than ready, the data isn't. The bridge is metadata, right? And the challenge there is, I've got technical metadata and I've got a business question, right? And so business questions going into an AI engine are never going to get it right. RAG isn't going to solve the problem because it's all technical metadata. I think that the opportunity with data products, when we do with data products, is we build data products with business metadata. We curate them with the business team in the room. And then we interrogate that data with the business team in the room with a Gen AI tool. And it's fascinating because they built the data product, they built the metadata, they're asking the questions, so they trust the answers much more. They start to get comfortable with Gen AI much more because they were part of the solution. I think that's how data products can help to accelerate AI. So that my minute is up, Randy. I'd love to talk more about data products. Maybe Datanova 2025, we come back and tackle it.
Yeah, no, this was great. What a way to wrap up Datanova. Thank you very much for your time and your questions. That was awesome.
Awesome. Thank you, Brandy. Thank you, Wayne. Thank you, Rob.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Likewise.
Likewise.